What's up, everybody? Jordan Stewart here from Vover. Thanks so much for tapping into the Vover original show. Just a reminder that if you want to drop your opinions about the episode or respond to the host and guests with your voice, go and download the Vover app wherever you get your apps. Vover, voice over everything. Enjoyed the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Friday, July 23rd edition of the Vover Wrestling Show. Ben Cruz here, the head of sports programming at Vover. And with me today is my old and current and forever tag team partner, the incomparable Jeremy Loss. Jay, what is up, my dude?
Chilling. It's always great to jump on a pod and talk wrestling with you.
It's always fun. And this one should be an interesting show because there's a lot of news floating around wrestling Twitter these days, and it has to do with two of the biggest names in wrestling history. You know, just some guys named CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. It seems like they are heading to AEW. I guess before we get into the specifics of that, does either of them surprise you that they are heading over there to AEW?
Part of me wants to say Bryan is surprising, but if you think about it, I mean, he has 2 kids now. He wants to work less dates.
Yep.
He wants to be a father, like he wants to be a present father. So that makes a ton of sense. Punk doesn't really surprise me. If he was ever going to get back into wrestling, it was going to go to AEW. He was never going to return to the WWE. That was like out of the picture. So that one, I would just say Bryan is a little bit more of an eyebrow raising move. But if you look at it from the perspective of like, hey, he just wants to be with his kids more. He wants similar money and he wants to be able to have some creative direction. It makes a lot of sense for him to go to AEW right now. And
there is the report that he did choose or is going to choose AEW because of the flexibility to also work in Japan, which he's always wanted to do. Yeah. Which I makes a ton of sense because AEW is very, very flexible with sending their stars all over the place, right? Whether it be New Japan, Impact, they don't have those closed doors like WWE does with the WWE universe, right? Like they're AEW's fine with the multiverse, the wrestling multiverse. So again, these are 2 monstrous names, right? And off top, like who are you more excited to see over there? Because look, obviously I think the answer should be Punk, but I haven't seen this dude wrestle in a really, really long time. And is wrestling like riding a bike? I don't know. I mean, when you see The Rock in there now, you see some ring rust and whatnot. So I think for me, I'm more excited to see Bryan in there in AEW with just dudes who can go, right? Who can work and create a compelling story. So I'm leaning more towards him. The Punk thing is just more intriguing because I haven't seen him in a while, but also that's part of the reason why I'm not as excited.
Yeah, I think the matchup possibilities and the story possibilities that you have with Bryan trump what you get with Punk. Punk, you get that initial wave of like, holy shit, he's back, and we get to see him on the mic. Like, he's a good in-ring worker, but I mean, he can't compare to Bryan. Bryan is one of the greatest of all time, and the thought of being able to see Bryan versus Omega in a long story, or getting to see Bryan versus Hangman, Bryan versus Pac, Bryan versus Mox again. I mean, I know that we've seen something similar in WWE, but like kind of with the shackles taken off and see them have a pretty good program together. Bryan and Penta, like there are endless possibilities there for really compelling storytelling and matches. I think for Punk, there's only, I feel like, a select few that really make sense for him in terms of storytelling and in terms of match as well. So part of me is not really excited to see Punk in wrestling again because, I don't know, maybe his stint in the UFC just kind of soured me on him. But like, I just don't, I like him better in a role where he just has to talk and he is just kind of a mouthpiece. He's one of the better ones on the mic. Seeing him in the ring and seeing him get physical, it's not believable to me anymore. And it doesn't excite me as much as seeing Bryan in there with the likes of a Kenny Omega.
Yeah.
For a 30-40 minute match. You know what I mean? Like that is like I'm salivating at the thought of that.
So here, I'm going to throw this out at you, just a hypothetical. And I'm not saying I want this to happen, but I'm just thinking about it because they're both coming in at around the same time. Would you be intrigued? And I'd also like to preface this with, I'm officially with you on that AEW has too many factions. Would you be intrigued by a Punk Bryan led AEW faction?
No.
Ooh, out.
Not at all.
Firm
Not at
no.
all. They're both like putting them in a faction does nothing for either one of them. They are both so well renowned. Both are really, really good talents that putting them it doesn't do them any service to put them together. Like they can do their things on their own. And like you said, AEW has way too many factions. Like I know that's just like a crutch to lean on when it comes to storytelling and trying to get as many people onto the show as possible. It's like, hey, let's put them in a faction and they'll just come out and be there. They need to get away from that because I feel like that's problematic when it comes to long-term storyline. I mean, you can look at the likes of like WCW and the fact that like everybody and their mom wasn't part of NWO, and then they had the Wolfpack, and then they had the LWO, and then it's just like they had way too many things going on. So I think they just need to come to grips with like, okay, these people are going to be on this show, these people are going to be on this show, and we're going to probably cut back on the amount of factions that we have, just so that we can allow some individuality come on, and allow people to grow as solo acts rather than like, hey, we need something to do. We need MJF to do something. Let's have him be part of this faction. And we need Sammy Guevara to do something. So let's put him in this faction. Like, let's let them grow as individuals.
Yeah. And I guess the last question that I had for you about Bryan and Punk is how damaging is this to WWE to have their competitor, their biggest direct competitor, at least here in the States, take two of the biggest names? Is that going to hurt WWE's bottom line? Because I mean, there are a bunch of weirdo WWE stands right now who are coming at Bryan on Twitter for bizarro reasons. But I mean, ultimately, I'm of the mind that WWE will be fine. Like they're a machine, as people have put it so frequently. Like they're, you can question their ability to really fully develop new stars, and we can shit on them all we want about how they do these NXT call-ups, right, with Karrion Kross. But then at the same time, you also have fucking Roman Reigns, who is the biggest name in the game. Like let's just call it what it is, right? So WWE does end up being kind of top heavy, and I don't think they get the credit for that sometimes. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on how damaging is Punk and Bryan going to AEW to WWE really?
I don't think it impacts their bottom line in the slightest, because WWE is a machine. This is different from 1996 when Nash and Hall went. I mean, WWE was going through some financial hardships, and it's a similar move in terms of like we have two mega stars moving to an opposing company, but it's different in the sense that like WWE is $1 billion company now. They're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to churn out shows, continue to put on matches and put on pay-per-views, and people are going to still go and buy merch and do all those things. So I don't think it impacts their bottom line very much. I do think it hurts the perception that WWE is kind of like the mega or like the mainstream wrestling organization, because I think that can eventually change in terms of AEW just taking over in terms of amount of viewers. They are already beating certain shows. So we'll see. I just don't think it ultimately impacts WWE all that much, because they can just continue to bring in random talents and put them in developmental and then put them on main roster. So yeah, it's not a seismic change like it was back in 96. It is a big change, but not seismic.
Sure. And they're going to counter this by bringing back Braun Strowman, if you saw any of the new reports. So
and another thing to take into account here is like, we have to start looking at AEW now, seeing how they grow and how they expand now that they're going to have another show. They're going to have another live audience to work with. They're going to have another live show to write on. So that's going to be something interesting to see how they adjust going forward. Are they going to split rosters like WWE, or are they going to try to make sure that everybody's on every show? Are they going to continue their cross promotion with Impact Wrestling? There's a lot of unknowns as to how things are going to work once AEW's product expands out to its full capacity. Right now, they have the benefit of like, hey, we're on YouTube for AEW Dark.
Yeah.
And then we have TNT, and then then they have the luxury of like, hey, we can expand out to Impact and tell our stories there. So things could fall apart a la WCW when they expand to, what is their next show called? Rampage, something like that.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see. Maybe that's why they're bringing in Punk and Bryan, so that they have those two talents to launch that show.
Yeah.
And have somebody there that people will tune in and know, similar to what they did with Jericho when they launched Dynamite.
Yeah. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. Jay, thanks as always for hopping on the Vover Wrestling Show. We got to get you back on here more. I think the two jabronis are out there searching for more two jabronis content. So we'll maybe it's time to reunite and bring back the old band. Thanks, dude. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
1, 2, 3.